Okay. Thanks for your patience. So, Meg, if you would start us off and introduce yourself with just a short introduction and maybe offer a tip to start things off, and then we'll go through each of the three folks, and then we'll open up the floor to questions.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yes, this is Meg Cox, and I've been on the board of the Alliance since 2005, and I am now president of the Alliance. I have been interviewed for Q.S.O.S, but I didn't start doing interviews right away. I've just been doing them for the last couple of years, and the very first one I did was Ricky Timms' father, so that was sort of stepping in with both feet. And my tip that I would say that took me a little while and is something worth thinking about is, and Amy did touch on it in the video, is the importance of listening more than talking and saying very little. And I love to talk, and I had to sort of train myself that this is not a conversation. It's an interview, and so I may want to jump in and say, oh, yeah, I like that person's quilts too, or, that's the way I do it too, but I pull myself back. And one of my models is, if you ever listen to Fresh Air with Terry Gross, it's amazing how little she says. So that's my tip, is to listen much more than you talk, and you can steer and you can add on, you can follow up, but it's their show.
Yeah, that's a really good one, Meg.
Mm-hmm.
Janniken, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Janniken Smucker. I am an Alliance for American Quilts board member as well. I'm currently serving as secretary, and I've been on the board. I started at the same time as Meg in 2005. And I started doing interviews. I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was soon before I joined the board. One of my professors at the University of Delaware, where I did my graduate work, organized volunteers to interview quilt makers at, I live in Philadelphia, at a Philadelphia juried art quilt exhibition, Art Quilts at the Sedgwick, and so I went and interviewed quilt makers for a day, and since then I've done a lot more on my own, and I've really enjoyed the process. I think this is such a great project. I really believe in it. A tip that I have kind of piggybacks on what Meg was saying, and that it's okay to have silences. And when we're having regular day-to-day conversations, sometimes, I'm guilty of this at least, you sometimes fill in the silences with more questions or more jibber-jabber. But sometimes when you ask an interviewee a question and it's quiet, that's important, and you want to give them adequate time if they want to answer, to contemplate and to think. And that silence really is part of the interview. It doesn't always get reflected in the transcript, but it's an important part of the conversation, of the interview. And one thing I really hope as we are moving forward with Q.S.O.S. is that we use the audio from the interviews more and more, and those silences will be an important part of how people answer questions.
Definitely. And it's hard to get used to that too, because when the silence comes up, it's a little awkward at first.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Alice Helms, you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alice Helms. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, and I have been interviewing, I think, about 4 years. I've done about 20 interviews. I've also, because of my proximity to the office, the Quilt Alliance office, I've helped Amy do some of the processing of the interviews. So I've had an opportunity to read a lot of the interviews, too. And as far as tips, it's funny, the two tips I was thinking of talking about were the ones that both Meg and Janniken gave. So I think that says something. Those are two really critical things and two challenges that I found as an interviewer. But I guess the other thing I would just say is you never need to worry about someone not saying enough. Quilters love to talk about quilting. So that's something you don't really have to worry about at all. People will talk. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Alice, by the way, was one of the fabulous stars in our video series. I mean, I appreciate that so much, Alice, and it was so wonderful how almost all the points I was trying to illustrate, you sort of acted out, about just sort of using verbal or body language to say, yes, I'm following you, I'm listening to you, shaking your head and not jumping in. And there were just many points where you did exactly what I needed as far as the video, so thank you.
I looked at that, Amy, and I was very happy to see that I do that.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. But,
unfortunately, we can't videotape everyone. However, that would be exciting.
It would be. A big challenge is, for me personally, is not to say,
Yes.
You
know, I just said it. I have a hard time with that, too.
Yeah.
Because you want to be empathetic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You want to let them know how much you want to hear from them. And I haven't gotten, just to let you all know, I will be letting you know when I assign you the schedule, and I promise I'm getting close. I will be letting you know, those of you that are doing the interviews, who you're interviewing, so that you'll have a chance to do a little research on that person before you interview them. We also will have a copy of the Lone Stars 3 book in our booth, so that you'll be able to, if you're doing these interviews on your own in your own community, you would, I certainly do, take a little time to get to know or to try to research that person a little bit. If they're not someone well-known or well-published on the web, at least, you might not be able to do that. But in this case, these folks are all, most of them, I would imagine you'd be able to find some information about them online. And certainly you'll be able to look at their pages in the book before you interview them. And especially if you want to do that, you may want to plan for a little extra time to come by the booth so that you can look over the book. You don't want to cut it close if you're planning to do that. Well, why don't we just open up for questions? Does anybody have a question for one of these folks?
I have a question. This is Karen, and I'm not sure who exactly that it's for. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Okay, because I'm on a speaker smartphone, and one never knows. First of all, your videos were great. I thought you have a wonderful voice for that, so I really enjoyed watching and listening to those.
Oh, thanks.
And here's my question. In the material that I read or heard on the video, I'm not sure exactly where, it mentions that the interviewee has the option or the right to review their interview before it's made final. And I'm not real clear on what the mechanics of that would be. Do they later read the transcript, or do we have to play the recording for them, or what did you have in mind for that?
That's a really good question, because we need to clarify that. In a situation where if you were interviewing someone in your community, you would be the point person and responsible for that interview, processing the entire thing, which would include interviewing the person, recording it, taking the photograph of the interviewee, and then having the recording transcribed, either by yourself, by someone you ask to help you who has those skills to provide that service. And then once the interview is transcribed, before you send it to us, both in digital electronic format and as a printed copy, you would mail it to the person or email it to the person, the interviewee, and have them go over it. And they have the option to take parts out. We really encourage them to only make changes to, correct spelling, clarify something. Sometimes things, depending on the quality of the audio, there can be sections that are inaudible. And if they remember what they said, they can insert missed words or things like that. Or if they've forgotten to mention, like, the state associated with the city, or maybe someone's last name, or maybe they forgot it at the time of the interview. And in that case, we can add that information in brackets so that it goes into the document and into the collection and into the Library of Congress, but it's not something that's actually on the tape. Now, in this situation, and then they would send it back to you, and you would send it to us, and we would, process it and put it online and then send it to the Library of Congress. But in this situation, because it's a large project and because we have some underwriting for the project, the transcribing will be done by a service. So we won't have volunteers doing the transcriptions. And what will happen is after festival is over, the transcribing will begin, and then we will handle sending out the transcriptions to the interviewees, and then they'll make their changes and send them back to us. Whereas in the in a community setting, they would be sending those corrections back to the interviewer or the transcriber, whoever the contact is.
So this is Meg Cox. Amy's just saying it's not something you need to worry about, except that you'll probably want to tell them when you're doing the interview that that's what's going to happen. So it's also another thing for them to be more relaxed, knowing that if they do make a mistake, they get their mother-in-law's last name wrong or something, they can fix it later. So
right, and it's good to know what the whole process is, though. So I'm glad you brought it up, because we do hope that this will volunteering at festival will result in folks doing these, in their community by themselves.
Right. So it is okay if we tell them they will receive a transcribed version to check.
That's right. And when they leave, Karen, they'll get a handout that will tell them what the next steps are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I just tried that mute feature so you guys wouldn't hear me coughing. How did that work?
I think it worked well.
Because I was sort of coughing and screaming,
It's so cool. Along those lines, too, somebody may have this question, and we talked about this on yesterday's call, but, it's okay to tell them that they can stop we can pause the recording at any time. It's a good idea that at the beginning of the interview to go over a couple of housekeeping things, and we'll put those on a sheet of paper that we'll have in each booth, along with the opening statement or opening announcement and the closing announcement. We'll have the basic text for that, and you'll just have to insert the person's name, your name, and the time and the date. But we'll also have some reminders there to help you, help them feel comfortable. And one of the things that I think makes people feel comfortable is to know that this is a grassroots project, and you may be no more experienced at it than they are. And that's okay. And it's okay to even say that. Well, this is my first interview. I'm looking forward to it, and we're going to learn together. I feel well trained, and here's how it's going to go. And you also can say that this recorder has a pause button on it, and we're not afraid to use it. If you feel like you get to a moment where you need to gather your thoughts or you get emotional, you can do that. And if they just need to pause, without pausing the recorder and just have some moments of silence, that's okay too. We can even indicate it on the transcript, paused for 10 seconds or something. What other questions do you all have?
This is Mary in San Antonio. I have a question about the actual recording of data. Can you use a video camera with audio, or do you want just a separate recorder?
You could use a video camera with audio if you know how to save that file as just an audio file. You're talking about, when you do this on your own?
Yes.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I know that I have software that I can take a video file and just save the audio track. You would have to, though, if that's the way that you're going to capture audio, that's the only tool that you have, and you're not going to use the video for any other purpose, that would be something to share with the interviewee. They wouldn't want to feel like you videotaped it and then you were going to post it online unassociated with the project. Those are important concerns because we have folks fill out a permission form, a release form, and, it constrains our use of the footage or the recording to use just for the project. So, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't use that equipment and just save it as an audio file. We require, we prefer WAV format audio files. Sometimes equipment, it depends on the equipment. Sometimes it saves it as a different format. And I could talk to you about that specifically when you're ready to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and sometimes I can convert the file too. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Amy?
Yeah.
This is Tay Satterfield in Houston. Now, in the booth, are there going to be like three people, the interviewer, and then the interviewee, and somebody that's running this equipment?
Well, the equipment is pretty easy to use, and we're going to have it all set up, and there will be an IT person who will be able to help you get set up when everybody gets settled in.
Okay.
I'm in the process of deciding whether we're going to use the clip-on microphones or whether we're just going to use the microphone that's inside the recorder.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty good one, but I haven't been in a really loud convention center yet. So I'm going to be testing it at the Georgia Quilt Show this weekend and kind of make my decision about that. It's likely that both the interviewer and the interviewee will have little clip-on lavalier microphones because they have a noise-canceling thing on it, and it helps with the background noise. And so the IT person or whoever's available to help would help with getting those on everybody and just showing you what to push to start. Okay. But it's so simple that I don't think you would need an attendant there in the room while you're doing it. So after they've helped you set up, it would just be the interviewer, the interviewee, and then in some cases a scribe. It looks like we're going to have to be able to assign scribes on almost every day but Sunday at this point. And probably what I'll do is try to, once I've got the schedule set, start recruiting for more folks on Sunday so we can have scribes in every booth. And the scribe really is, I think you probably got this from the video, but the scribe is, it's nice to have someone serve as a scribe, not only for the information that they record, but it's also a nice way for somebody to learn how to be an interviewer. They can sort of have a trial run with an interview without having to be the one responsible for pushing the button and asking the questions. So I think that it's going to be. You'll find that it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
And we'll have it set up so that the interview, after each booth finishes an interview, then the IT person will pull the little memory card out of the recorder and replace it with a new one, so that you won't be fearful when you do your interview of recording over someone. Or, I mean, that's what I would worry about, honestly.
That's what I would worry about, too.
So I figured we just get it out of there. As soon as it's done, we'll get it out of there, get it into the computer in two places, and better safe than sorry, because it'd probably be pretty hard to actually record over one the way it's set up, but you could erase it.
Yep, sure could.
So we'll just we'll back it up as best and fast as we can.
This is Jane Davis. Excuse me. Have you ever had anybody balk, start the interview and then they decided they just really didn't want to do this?
Joniken, have you ever had anybody end an interview like that?
Not in midstream. I've had someone once when she got the transcript back opted not to have it posted. But not during the interview.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people get so nervous, they might say, I just can't do this.
Yeah. I could see it happening, but maybe in this situation, since there's been so much build-up and so much communication beforehand, and one difference, too, is all of these folks are in this book are probably folks who talk about their work quite a bit.
Right, and plus that they're talking about something they love.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference, too.
Yeah, it does. But it is hard. I mean, have any of you been interviewed?
No.
Alice has been interviewed by me.
Yes.
And she had done probably how many, 16 interviews prior to that or something?
Yes.
Were you nervous?
I was nervous leading up to it, but as soon as we started, you know, it was like I said, we love to talk about quilting. I totally forgot. I was nervous.
Yeah, this is Meg Cox, and I have to say that the same thing happened with me. And I know other people that I've interviewed sometimes, even famous quilters, they there is that moment where they start to think, this is going on my permanent record, as in Library of Congress is kind of daunting. And it just, once you get started, you're fine. And since you usually start them by talking about that particular quilt that they brought, you quickly get them into it. And also, to testify, there are some people who just don't want to do this, but most people, Carol Fallert, for example, very famous quilter, we had tried to interview her twice before, and there were problems. The first time, the tape was destroyed, and we didn't have any of it. And it was important enough for her to do this that she let us keep trying. So now we finally done it the third time as a charm, and we're getting ready to post that. So.
That's probably a good segue to the possibility that the interviewee may have an emotional moment, and finessing and being supportive during that, and just technically what you do. Meg, you've had that happen. How did you handle it?
Well, speaking of Carol Fallert, it's actually kind of a funny story. I mean, I had done the training and been told over and over again, always have a box of Kleenex, because people do get emotional, and typically they get emotional over that question about, have you ever used quilts to get you through a difficult time, which is something I always make sure that I ask. And with Carol Fallert, we were being filmed both by Jody Davis from the Alliance Board and also by the filmmakers from the Stitch documentary. So there were two cameras on us. We were sitting on very tall chairs with no table around us. And much to my surprise, one of the things that she started talking about, she started crying. And I just we just both sort of laughed about it, because I said, I never thought I would get, you of all people would cry. And of course, I have no pockets in my pants and I have no tissues. So, you could stop the tape if the person, wanted you to, or you roll with it. You can say, are you okay? Do you want to go on? But I think that it shows that the quilts and people's quilt stories are very powerfully emotional, so you shouldn't be surprised if that happens.
Right, and it's fine to pause and let them. I'm kind of an empathy crier too, so if somebody cries interviewing them, I'm definitely going to be crying. So I'm going to need a little time to, recoup too. But also, the beginning of the interview, that it's also okay for them to say pass. It's also, it's okay if they don't have an answer to a question, because you're not going to have a whole lot of time to sort of customize the question for each person. One of the things that Amy Henderson, who is also a veteran interviewer who was on our call yesterday, said is that you might want to go through, she goes through the quadrant questions, which is the list of questions that you choose from, and I sent you a link to that on the last email I sent you, is go through and kind of pick the ones that you think that strike you as being interesting, and use those for that quadrant. You don't have to ask every one. And she was saying it made her feel confident going in with a couple questions highlighted for each section. And she particularly chose ones that she thought most people would have an answer to. There's some that are a little specific that you might not, maybe she determined that she wouldn't have an answer to it, therefore she didn't ask it. So, but it is okay for someone to pass and go to the next one.
Amy, this is Alice. I usually tell the interviewee before I start that if I ask a question that they just don't have an answer to, they can just pass on it. So they know that going into the interview.
Yeah.
That we have plenty of questions. They don't have to answer every one. They can just say, I don't care to answer that one, and we'll move on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to handle it.
Because I think some people are afraid to say, I don't have an answer to that, or I don't know. or they're hesitant to say that. So, if you sort of give them permission at the beginning to do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, before we start taping, I say that to them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really smart.
Well, this is Casino. Do you ever let the interviewee just have a look at the questions and maybe pick out one or two that they'd rather answer?
They do get a copy, Casino, of the questions. They'll get. I've sent them a copy of where the questions are, and they'll be able to review it. I don't know that we've ever. Has anybody ever done it that way, where they've let the interviewee choose the questions?
Amy, this is Alice again. I usually, when I interview people, I usually ask them if they would like to see the questions ahead of time, because I think that will make them less nervous if they at least know they can. What I do is I just give them a link to the website to read other interviews. Sometimes people say, I don't want to see what the questions are ahead of time. Yeah. But I've never asked anyone to pick questions, but I have asked people to let me know if there was a question they definitely did not want me to ask. Mm-hmm. I've done that a few times. Mm-hmm. I don't know that anyone's ever come up with one. But I think it just makes them feel more comfortable about it.
This is Yannikin. While we're on the subject of the quadrant questions, another bit of advice I have is to not feel bound by them. They're guidelines, and yes, you should hit some from each quadrant, but the worst kind of oral history interview, in my opinion, is one that is a checklist of questions.
Right.
Where you are trying to hit each question, and you move on to the next one. Let it be open to where the interview is going to lead, because it might take you down some tangent that even on the quadrant that is really interesting and really relevant and important for the interviewee to be talking about. So don't feel like you need to get through the next question to the next question. Just you can, if asking a follow-up or letting a person tell a longer story. There's all kinds of ways that the interview can flow and allow it to flow rather than feeling like it's a checklist.
Well, I agree with that. I think a lot of times they'll go down a path that we would have never thought of, and it can end up being a fascinating interview.
Yeah,
exactly.
This is Meg, and I agree you do have to put some of that in there. And but I also want to say to follow carefully what Yannikin is saying about using some of them. I have found that some of the ones that I thought were least promising are, too general, like, the things about the significance of quilting and the history of America and, these type of questions. I thought, oh, come on. But what I find is that, again, because people are struck by the seriousness of the setting and the context, is that they really are very thoughtful, and it gives them a chance to think about their work in a bigger picture way than they might ordinarily. And so sometimes I'm surprised by the really interesting comments I get. People just grab onto those things and say some pretty profound things. So sort of a bit of both. Don't be totally rigid about it, but on the other hand, there's some very good questions in there.
Hi, this is John in New York. On the website, you have the one page that is the quick questions that the interviewee answers. If we're doing interviews, when is it that we get that information about the person to have that knowledge?
Yeah,
of what they've said.
That's a really good question. I haven't quite figured that out yet, to be honest. I mean, sometimes some people use them and others don't. And I guess we could make that a part of the handouts that they get when they first walk in. And it's a checklist, for those of you who don't know. It's called the Quick Questions. And it was designed to be a way to just get an overview of the person's interest and experience in quilt making, so that it's sort of a, do you make quilted clothing? Yes, no. Have you ever taught quilting? Yes, no. So that it gives the interviewer a little bit of a guide to keep them, to help them steer what questions they ask.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've considered a couple things. One is that they fill it out when they're filling out the rest of the forms when they get there, because it probably takes maybe, just a couple minutes to fill it out, and then you would have a chance as the interviewer to review it. Or as you're hanging up their quilt, any time in the preliminary period. I've also thought of making it into a survey and having the interviewees fill it out beforehand, and we would just print it out and be able to distribute it. I'm feeling like we don't have enough time to do the latter. But we could certainly include it in the forms that they fill out at the beginning. What I'm trying to do with the scheduling is make sure that if you're doing more than one interview in a morning or an afternoon, if you're serving as a scribe or an interviewer, you have just enough breathing time in between so that you can greet people and review things. So probably that's how we're going to handle it. Mm-hmm. It can be really helpful. Sometimes it doesn't, you'd probably get to that information in the interview itself, but there have been a couple folks that I know in festival interview sessions that have been done in the past that their object was quilted clothing, or they're a well-known teacher, so you'd want to ask some questions about that. But I think that was really good advice before about letting. If you go down a path, you may think you're missing out on other questions, and just sort of let them answer as much as they want. They may end up answering questions throughout the quadrant list without you even asking them in the process of going down that path.
That's true.
And I always find that to be a little tricky because I'm listening. The whole time you're interviewing, you're listening, that whole active listening, close, careful listening, but you're trying to, nod and listen that way to let them know you're listening, but sometimes I lose track, and they've answered something that I'm about to ask or I'm planning to ask later within the context of another answer, and I somehow missed it, and then I ask the question again. And people are usually very polite. Well, as I said before, and they repeat it. But that's okay, too. And I also wanted to say, there's crying, but there's usually a lot of laughing, too. Mm-hmm. And it's okay for you to laugh with them. You don't have to be completely silent. And that laughing goes on the transcript.
Yeah, I was surprised. This is Meg. I was reading the transcript of my interview with Kay Fassett, and I was laughing through the whole thing. I guess I've forgotten how funny he was.
Those are my favorite. I love to read the ones also where this won't happen. Hopefully there won't be any dogs in there. But although I think I did see a dog at festival once, where like a dog will start barking, and they put it in brackets. Or, we will have to put things like if there's an announcement and it comes on and the recording picks it up, we'll just put announcement, or we'll put something at the beginning that says throughout this recording there are announcements because it was taped at a quilt festival.
How many interviews will we be doing in one session?
Well, we have 3 booths, and we have 3 interviews in each booth, so 9 in the morning and 9 in the afternoon.
But what is the individual person doing?
Right. Well, each individual person, I don't have any one person doing more than 2 in a morning or afternoon session.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the folks who are doing other things other than interviewing or scribing, their shifts will be, will cross over a couple different, at least 2 interviews, if not 3, their job. But I think, if you do more than 2 in a row, it's pretty fatiguing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You kind of lose your ability to stay focused. I do. So, if you're signed up for the morning and the afternoon, you could possibly do 4 in one day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, but we're trying to keep it reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Once we get to the festival, can we sign up for other sessions there?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
In fact, once I finish the schedule, I probably am going to have to ask folks to consider, additional sessions if they're able to. And we'll also, I haven't shared this with everybody yet, but we're also going to have just an Alliance for American Quilts booth in the nonprofit section, and we have to staff that the whole time. So whenever we have more volunteer hours offered, we'll be asking those folks, some folks, if they can sit at the table and just explain what Q.S.O.S is to people and what some of our other projects are. And we'll give you plenty of training on that too, probably right, on the job that day. Our website is the best research you can do to be able to speak on our behalf, but that's another need we're going to have to fill. But we have a lot of jobs. Interviewing 9 people in 3 hours roughly is still going to take a lot of bodies, because I don't want anybody to feel like they're you're just learning. You don't want to feel stressed out by having too many roles to cover. And it's also, we're asking someone to come and talk to us for 30 to 45 minutes, and it's really important that we don't screw up that tape, that recording, It's really important that everybody's job is specific enough that there's no worry that the tape will be taken out of the recorder and backed up on the computer in 2 places, and the photograph will be taken and labeled with the right number on it. The documentation process of an oral history project is specific for a reason. Taking those photographs with the numbers, with the person holding up the number. Talked about that yesterday, being, the group in Michigan, South Central Michigan, Q.S.O.S project, they said they've switched to putting it on in Photoshop later, because they felt like, and I have felt that way too, that it's a little awkward for the person who's standing there with the number in front of them. But it's important. So anyway, you do it.
It's the only way you can be sure of accuracy. There's nothing worse than getting the wrong interview with the wrong page.
Right, exactly. So in our case, we really can't do that, because we have to have that number in the photo to ensure that was indeed the right person with the right quilt that will match to the tape and the transcript. So.
I know when I've helped Jody with filming at the market, whenever we do anything, I have their names written out, printed, and their website printed, and they held that very prominently under their faces, and that way we make sure that the right ones got to the right filming.
Yeah, that's really smart. Keeps it all in one place.
Yes.
Will the interviewees show more than one item? I noticed in the training videos that they were only showing one item.
Well, we've asked them to just bring one, but sometimes they do bring more than one. And we would photograph, whatever they bring, but we try to, we'll use one as the touchstone object and ask them about that one object probably first. I think most people will just bring one thing, and we'll take a full photograph of it and then a couple details. But if they bring more than one thing, then we don't do as many details. We might take a full frame shot of the 2 quilts they brought and one detail of the main one or something.
But especially since this is, I guess these are Texas quilters, so they probably have it in their car, because I was going to say you wouldn't want to pack a whole bunch of quilts.
Yeah, no, I'll remind them that really we just want one. And that brings up another question, which is they won't be using the quilt that they have on exhibit in the Lone Stars 3 exhibit. And for some folks that's a disappointment, because that's the one they might want to talk about. But logistically, we just couldn't figure out how, we couldn't take their quilt off exhibit to bring into the booth to photograph and have by the interview station, and we really, sound-wise, could not go out in front of that exhibit area. And also just, I could see us interviewing someone and then someone walking up and asking questions. Meg interviewed Kay Fassett, but the hall was closed, right, Meg?
Yeah, well, the show hadn't even started for the day, and it's impossible to make out a lot of words.
Yeah. Let's see. What if, one question I had was, what do you do if the person maybe is not a big talker, and they don't go all the way to 45 minutes. You know, maybe you felt like you've really done everything you can, pulled out all your tricks to extend the interview time, and at the end of, say, 25 minutes, they've said all they want to say. That's fine. You know, you don't feel like you have to drag it on if they're done.
This is Meg.
One suggestion yesterday, Jeannie Wright of an interviewer in Maine said that she often gives people sort of a sense that the interview is getting close to the end, maybe 5 minutes before, instead of saying, well, we're almost at the end. What else? Is there anything else you'd like to say? She sort of gives a hint at that earlier so that they can, you know, if they have something bigger to say, that they can pace themselves so that they can get it out by the end of the interview.
And Amy, this is Alice. I learned early on in interviewing because I learned to do that because I had someone say to me when it was over, oh gosh, I was hoping I'd have a chance to just say whatever. You know, I was hoping I could, you know. So now I do that. I give them a chance to add something to it, maybe 5 minutes before the end.
I think that is good. And the other tip that Evelyn Salinger of New Mexico pointed out or shared was, she says she also uses the language, she says, well, we're close to the end. Are there any other stories that you'd like to share? Like, she doesn't say, is there anything else you'd like to say? She says, are there other stories you'd like to share?
Good.
I think that's good. This is Meg, and I... And interviewing Ricky Tim's dad, he is a man of very few words, and so it was really tough to get to 20 minutes. And you know, you can only do what you can do, and he just did the quilting. He didn't really want to talk about it very much. So, you know, you just say, fine, thanks for sharing that with me. And I don't think that will be the case with these Texas quilters. But
I'm just guessing they're probably, you know, as Alice said, we like to talk about quilts and quilt making, so probably that won't be the case. But it's good to know, you know, be prepared for the full range of what could happen.
This is Yannick. Along the lines of allowing them to say whatever else they want to say towards the end of an interview, the line I've used in interviews, some that I've done for my own research, is, are there any questions I've neglected to ask? So sometimes, I mean, it's similar to what Alice, I believe, was saying about. I've got a baby down. Hold on. Anyway, that's the line. I'm going to mute again.
Okay. I think that's a really good point, Yannick, because you know, just however you phrase it, so that it's open enough to invite them to you know, to add that last thing that they haven't said. One other thing that I think might come up too is, you know, how when someone asks you, they might ask you a follow-up, you're talking about a certain time period, and you say, well, what year was that? And then all of a sudden the person gets panicked, or, oh my goodness, I don't know. And they just can't remember, and it's on the tip of their tongue, and they're really frustrated. You can just say, oh, no worries, we'll find out and add it later to the transcript, you know.
That's a good tip, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't allow them to freeze just because of a forgotten name, place, person. You know, that's the story of my life. I've got way too much in my brain. I can't remember. You know, I call children by cat names frequently. It just happens. So you have to allow them, you know, give them the kind of support that allows them just to move on. Any other questions or thoughts?
No, I think you've covered things very well.
Oh, good. Meg or Alice?
I think we covered a lot of ground, and I again would urge you to do a little checking on the person that you're going to interview, so you do feel like you have a little bit of a sense of what type of quilter they are, or you know, some of their past history. It just makes it easier to sort of guide the interview.
Right. And two, the practice interview that I encourage folks to do, that can just be picking a couple questions and asking, someone in your family who's not even a quilt maker. Just the sense of, and they don't have to be our questions. They could be questions that would make sense to that person. It's just sort of getting used to. A lot of you've done oral history interviews, so this isn't new to you. But if you haven't, it's a good way to sort of get that whole comfort with silence thing going, getting comfortable with being silent yourself, and listening while sort of planning the next question, which is one of the hardest things, I think. Mm-hmm. But I think you're going to do great. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm determined to have a lot of fun.
Oh, we are.
And we've got so many different, so many skills coming to being, brought to the team. I think it's just really interesting, actually, how many people do have oral history experience and photography experience and, experience managing other people. So I'm feeling really, really lucky, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun together. Good.
Amy?
So thank you for making time for this.
Who wanted to speak up?
Amy,
yeah,
this is
somebody
Tay.
have a question?
This is Tay.
Hey, Tay.
Hey. What time are we supposed to be there on Wednesday?
We are going to meet at 3 o'clock in the first floor, ground floor lobby of Exhibit Hall E.
Okay.
Which is one all the way as you're facing from your back to the street, one all the way to the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep, they want us to do that first because the preview for IQA members starts at 5. And so they want to take us, because we won't have any name tags at that point. So we won't have any ID. So they're going to meet us and actually escort us back to our area, so we're so they can ensure that we're well behaved and trustworthy. And well, shenanigans do have happened before there. So
quilters are a dangerous group.
But after that, where we go back to the booth and everything, and since we're already on the quote inside of the show, can we just go from there, like over where, go ahead and go to the show?
No, they're pretty strict about that. That's why they want us to go first, because when we go in at 3, by 4 o'clock, we'll be heading up the stairs to a classroom where we're going to have the rest of the session.
Okay.
Because at 5 o'clock, you have to have an IQA badge to get in.
I know.
So if you already have an IQA badge or you're working or something like that, you can, after our session or whenever you need to, can get in there. But our badges won't give us badges until, I think you could, if you're working Thursday morning, you'll probably be able to get a badge that evening, probably right before the show closes. They're pretty particular about it.
Okay.
So, Amy, if we come late, like I won't be there till late Thursday afternoon, where do I check in first?
You'll check in at the volunteer desk. It's on the second floor. They have all volunteers, even for just regular Quilt Angel volunteers, check in at the same place. And it's on the second floor right off the escalator between, like, E and D. So it's the main one you come up coming out of the exhibit hall. And you go to the top there, and you'll just give them your name. I don't think you have to give them your ID to copy or anything. You might have to show it just to verify you're who you say you are, and then they give you your badge then.
Okay.
Yep, so just leave a little bit of time. So, and I'll tell you this, their main volunteers start at 10 o'clock when the show opens. I'll tell everybody this too via email, but if you want to avoid a big crowd, you want to not go for your badge about, between 9 and 10.
Well, I thought I would try to come get it Thursday afternoon because I'm actually scheduled Friday and Saturday, so that's what I'll be trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's better to go right before the show closes the night before, if you can, the afternoon before, because and they probably won't issue them until, say, the last hour of the show the night before, because they are very protective of people getting in on a day that they're not working. But it's better to do that, so that's a good plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
All right, everybody. Any more questions?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
If I have any, I'll email you.
Yep, that sounds good. Please, I invite everybody to do that. Thanks for your time. Look forward to seeing you.